When I was a kid growing up in Gainesville, we knew there were springs around, obviously. We had no sense of the fact that this is the springs mecca of the world.
The first time I ever went on the river, I was about 11 years old, family vacation, and we had heard people talk about it, how wonderful it was, and you're like, yeah, they say that about everything. I just remember seeing those first rays hitting the eelgrass, waving back and forth in the current, wonderfully clear water, and then seeing turtles and fish darting everywhere. And the first thing I thought was, they weren't lying. The key to it. We don't want to damage the river. The best way you can compare the Ichetucknee to the Santa Fe is if you take a spring system right on the Santa Fe, such as the Jenny Spring system or the Hornsby Spring system, and magnify it 1,000 times. It's not really a Blackwater stream like the Santa Fe is. It's a clear running spring run stream for its entire length. And that makes it different. The spring and river plant and animal communities are so diverse that there's no way you'll see all of it on the first visit.
And then about 25 years ago, we decided to start an outfitter with guided tours, with the real emphasis being on teaching. In those 25 years, I've seen a lot of change. It's kind of changing exponentially with more and more people. The protection paradox, they call it. You're wanting to get people out there, but then you want to preserve these lands. But by doing that, then you're sort of like opening these things up for a lot more usage.
So I remember coming up, ripping off my mask and snorkel and going, this place is wonderful. So I love to see kids still doing that. And that's one reason why I got into conservation and biological science and land management. And this last time was the same. So they were asking me my opinion. So I'm the biologist who's measuring that allowable use. So it's kind of like giving a pollution permit. Yeah. You can go back in Florida's resort history. Springs were a resort place. People came there for therapy. They came there for vacations. That has not changed. And it was around that time that the springs were also starting to show some damage. It's only been recently that tubing was eliminated from the north end of the park. There was physical disturbance on the bottom of the river, people wading just in shallow areas, uprooting plants. So there's a lot of adaptive management that has to go on. And if it's a good policy, you see that reflected in the ecosystem itself.
Just in this last year, they have decided to stop allowing tubing altogether in the upper river. Restricted cutoff tubing in that part of the river, and now you can only tube in the lower river, which is a good thing for the river's health. I know a lot of people were not terribly happy about that for obvious reasons, and I love tubing the river too. But it seems like they've struck a really good balance in that regard.
So that's a physical impact. The other impact is through water chemistry changes, which has to do with how you're using the land all around the spring. And you may end up with more substances, more chemicals, nitrates and phosphates. Those act like fertilizers. It makes a lot more algae grow. So the algae is there naturally, but it can get out of control and cause a lot of change that way.
That's one of the really big issues. We all love our green lawns. You go up this river, you're going to see some green grass right to the water. That's a big one, and people love their green lawns. And you would think that since we all live on these waters, talking about the river people, you would think we would just be one common voice. Unfortunately, we kind of work against each other sometimes. When it comes down to the actual protecting the river, people get on board, but sometimes you get resistance from people living on the rivers because they don't want to stop fertilizing their lawn, and they just figure it's intrusive to their freedoms or whatever.
So I am a Gainesville resident for a long time now, but I'm also a Florida native. And growing up, I grew up going to the springs. That was the thing to do. I actually grew up in Old Town, which was close to Fanning Springs, Manatee Springs, but there's a lot of springs in the area. And so that's what I grew up doing with my family. And as I've gotten older, the sad thing is I've noticed the decline in the water quality and the number of fish that you can see. I have extras, so let me know and I will bring some over. It happens all the time, so. But yeah, I think that's it. So the Springs Watch program, essentially there are different groups. So our group is what we call the wet group, and we actually count the fish to get an overall biomass, and we collect other data on snail populations and do a water clarity. But there's another group, which is the water quality group, and they go out and do other tests on conductivity, just different samplings. Springs Watch is actually part of the Florida Springs Institute. So each Springs Watch group is coordinated by a different volunteer, and we all send our data into FSI headquarters where they compile it and put it into beautiful little reports, big reports in a lot of cases, and they're the ones who make it accessible to the public.
We're here today at Gilchrist Blue Spring to conduct some water quality monitoring, measure the discharge of the spring, and look at submerged aquatic vegetation. I'm an environmental scientist with the Howard T. Odom Florida Springs Institute. We are an environmental education and science nonprofit located right here in High Springs, Florida. For water quality monitoring, we measure pH, the water temperature. We also sampled today for nitrate nitrogen and color. That's a water sample we grab that will be sent to a lab to be analyzed. The nitrate and flow reduction problems are very broad problems that really affect the entire region. So a lot of the springs, they have the same ailments. The springs really need all the monitoring they can get to really see these trends, and so that restoration actions can be diagnosed and management plans recommended.
We're just taking a couple hours on a Saturday every month, and we're contributing to so much information that can be used to inform legislation and really just kind of help preserve the health of these recreational places that we all enjoy so much. You don't have to have a science background. You can just be a person with a passion about something. In this case, it's water conservation. So getting involved in something like this has been really interesting and a unique opportunity to contribute to a set of data that actively tracks this decline in quality. I'm just one example of a person who I asked and I found out that this group existed. But anybody can do it. If you're interested in cleaning up trash, for example, out of the waterways, there's Current Problems Florida and Kings of the Springs, which are all local, and they actively clean out trash from our waterways. And if you're just interested in politics, you could look at the Florida Springs Council and maybe volunteer with them. They do more of the political side of water conservation, and of course the Florida Springs Institute is more science-based.
Yeah, as far as just handling all the different conservation issues facing us and the waterways and the planet in general, it gets so overwhelming. It's hard to just put blame on in any one direction. I mean, it's obviously a number of things. All our remedies are going to be for nothing with the way the population continues to grow. It's just, there's no way around that. at the current trajectory, the way things are going right now, we would definitely be seeing a steady decline in the springs. You know, you can't enter in a forest, you can't walk through a forest without having an impact. No matter how much you tiptoe or, you know, you just gently go down a river, you're a part of that system now. You know, really, I mean, there's got to be some places that are really preserved, not just preserved for our recreation, but preserved for their own sake. You know, once in a while I'll try to enlighten kids, you know, that now that you've been down this river, you changed this river. That river is now different because you were here. The future of this river, you are now part of this river's story. It's history from here forward. The wildlife, what's going to happen in this river from this day forward has your stamp on it. You are part of this river's story.